Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Legal Lunch Byte, episode 13. And I'm joined today by our good friend, Rafael Arcuri. And let's just get right into it. Rafael, if you could briefly introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Rafael Arcuri. I'm the president of the National Association of Industrial Hemp here in Brazil. I'm a lobbyist and I'm specialized in regulatory law here in Brazil, specializing in cannabis for at least 4 years now. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here.
No, thank you for joining us. And we want to ask you about all sorts of things related to cannabis in Brazil. So let's start off with medical cannabis. What's the state of play at the moment for medical cannabis in Brazil?
We have one of might sound that I'm bragging, but we have one of the most advanced regulations for medical cannabis in the world because we had two great movements from our regulatory agency that's called Anvisa. So we had a very strict good in the sense that provides a high quality product for the patients without the request, the need to prove efficacy over the placebo as in drug regulations. So we have a drug by all means, except that those companies that have a health authorization to market those products, they can market them without being a drug, but with a high standard of quality for the patient. And we have also, and those products, they are sold in pharmacies here in Brazil. So it's very easy to access them. You need just a prescription from your doctor and you're ready to go in the closest pharmacy. And then we have a possibility for the patient to import the products that are sold legally in their country of origin. So if we have a company in Florida or Oregon that can sell, for instance, CBD derived hemp, CBD derived from hemp that you guys can export. So those companies can sell in Brazil as medical cannabis. We have also one drug registered here in Brazil, a high THC drug. And we have something a little bit more peculiar to our context. That is a lot of legal decisions, like 5,000 or 6,000 around the country, giving authorization for patients to grow their cannabis plants and extract the oil for medical purposes. And we also have something that's very unique to Brazil. That is a set of associations, ONGs, that gather patients and were granted legal authorization to cultivate and distribute cannabis products for the members of said association. So we have like this 5 points cannabis regulation. But despite that, we cannot grow cannabis in Brazil, so we have to import everything. That's why we have so many foreign companies here in Brazil.
Excellent. And what about industrial hemp? What's the status with those products?
That's a little bit trickier because we have, I think most countries from 10 years ago, we had a general prohibition on cannabis products that did not clearly made a distinction between medical cannabis, recreational, and industrial hemp products. So what we have here in Brazil is that we have this general prohibition on cannabis sativa and the substances derived from it. But at the same time, we are allowed to, as in the rest of the world, to commercialize, import, and manufacture derived products derived from the fibers. But we don't, but that's basically it. The products derived from textiles, bioplastics, some other products derived from the fiber, but we cannot explore here in Brazil, even if we import hemp derived foods, the foods derived from the seeds. And that is something very unique to Brazil. It's a very strict prohibition that falls under the general prohibition of cannabis. We're trying to overcome that because it's very easy. We have the single convention with a very clear exception on Article 28 for those seeds and fibers products, but we're not there yet. But when the market opens, that's going to be a very interesting market here in Brazil.
Got it. From what you're describing, you have different actors helping craft the law as it relates to medical cannabis, as it relates to cannabis more broadly. We have a bit of a similar situation in the U.S. where we have the federal government and the state government, and within those governments, different agencies. And that creates issues. So I'd like to ask for your views on how that is playing out in Brazil. I mean, I imagine that there will be some inconsistencies, but what impact are those having on the day-to-day practices?
I think it's the main point right now, because we have the Supreme Court with trying to decriminalize possession of especially marijuana. They needed to do a distinguishing between all drugs and marijuana. There were some votes that tried to decriminalize all drugs, but right now we have the majority of votes to decriminalize the possession of marijuana. So that's a very old lawsuit that reached the Supreme Court after, I don't know, 10, 15 years. But it was in a specific time here in Brazil that we have the most conservative Congress maybe in our history. And that generated a reaction from Congress, and the Senate proposed an amendment to the Constitution, putting in the articles of rights, like almost our Bill of Rights, the criminalization of the possession of all drugs. So that is a lot of tension between those two players. And we have a higher federal court. There's not a constitutional court that is always also with a decision that might legalize hemp in a federal level, and that's very big. And we have Anvisa, our health regulatory agency, that has those two rules that I already said, and the drug registration. And we have the lower judiciary, that the first and second instances, that already have some different and not very coherent decisions on what is allowed and what is not allowed. So we have right now maybe a turning point that may come from some of those players that all have jurisdiction to regulate cannabis at some level. And we have the possibility of having a very big opening of the market, or a very strict closure of the market that it will not affect businesses very much, but the end consumer that actually uses drugs. So it is good, but it's a competition that can turn sideways.
Got it. Depending on who's prevailing, right? That competition can be good or bad depending on who's looking at it. Rafael, my own practice is heavily focused on intellectual property, and I particularly enjoy my work at the intersection of intellectual property law and cannabis law. So I'm curious as to the intellectual property issues that are coming up in Brazil. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Our USPTO is called ENPI. ENPI had a very strict positioning on brands that did not allow brands that used as a sign marijuana, cannabis, or hemp. They did not allow in the majority of cases, but there were some cases that go through and gotten a registration, but it shifted lately because the main point was that they argued that brands that contain the signs either marijuana, cannabis, or hemp, they were against the good moral of the country. So, in rough terms, they were terms that could not be registered. But since 2015, we are having those new rules, new regulations coming into place. We have the national health system, that's a public system that is already incorporating in some states legal marijuana, legal medical cannabis. So we had a shift in the position from our USPTO, and they are now allowing those products, those brands, to be registered with those signs. So that's a good thing for companies here in Brazil, companies from abroad that wish to protect their brands.
Yeah, the cannabis industry certainly has very serious issues here in the United States when it comes to registering its trademarks. But one thing we don't have to worry about are the morality grounds, since Supreme Court decided a few years ago that was that part of the law was unconstitutional. So at least something we don't have to worry about. But of course, there are all sorts of other restrictions. So Rafael, to wrap up, I want to turn to a concern and interest that we always have here at the firm, and that involves opportunities, business opportunities for our clients, but more broadly for companies in the U.S. and elsewhere that might be looking at Brazil as a promising market in the medical cannabis and or industrial hemp spaces. So what is your view on that? If you were just taking advantage of this platform to address those businesses that might be interested in those markets, what would you say to them?
I think the two big shifts we might have in the near future are animal use, either from cannabinoids to medical cannabinoids used for veterinary purposes, or hemp feed for animals, because I think that's something that could open up rather quickly, and something that's not right there yet, but I think it will open in the next, I don't know, year probably. It is the hemp food market. And the traditional food industry here in Brazil, they are very interested in that because the 9 amino acids that hemp protein has, the amount of protein from each seed. So we have a possibility to integrate that in the food production here in Brazil, and that would be great. So I would bet in those two animal uses and hemp foods.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Rafael, it's been a wonderful conversation as always. We hope to have you back again at some point. For now, thank you once again for joining us, and to our audience, join us next week for a conversation about Florida's upcoming vote to legalize adult use cannabis. That promises to be a very interesting conversation as well. So thanks to everyone, and see you next week.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to talk to you. Bye bye.